and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. We're still in our bunkers, but now discussing whether or not we need to arm ourselves given the onslaught headed for us.
And I have to recover from that. We are looking forward to LGBTQ History Month, October. But we start in the news with...
I hope we get through it.
Well, not a laughing matter. We start by talking about the debate where bully Trump was on full display, and I would say to Biden's benefit.
Well, I would say bully is an understatement, but we'll get to that. Meanwhile, in other news that alarms us, Amy Coney Barrett has been nominated to the Supreme Court.
That's too bad. Franklin Graham and Mike Pence led a super spreader prayer demonstration at the Lincoln Memorial.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. And Eric Trump, dopey Eric Trump, says he is a part of the LGBT community. Then he figured out what he said and pulled out.
New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, our buddy, sometimes our co-host on the show, has bowed out of the 2021 mayoral race.
Puerto Rico's trans pioneer Soraya Santiago has died at 73. Yeah.
Yes, we're going to show you pride celebrations in the Ukraine and not in Kyiv and Uruguay.
And we're sad to report, we anticipated this a couple of weeks ago, but Timothy Ray Brown, the first person in the world cured of AIDS or seems to have gotten rid of HIV, has now died of leukemia.
And there is going to be a star-studded 1-hour version of Angels in America online on October 8th, and you won't believe who's playing Roy Cohn.
It's a lot of mixed casting by gender and race and all sorts of things. So we'll give you some details on that.
It is.
But we start with the real shockaroo of the debate this week. I just think Trump has gone into full incitement of violence. That is his formula now. He knows he can't get more votes. He can't even get more electoral votes. And his solution is violence against Biden in the debate, violence in the streets. That is his strategy.
He's a violent person. He's trying to rev up the Proud Boys. I mean, does he have, well, of course, a lot of his side are the people with the guns, but does he have enough people to send to the polls? And will that make any difference since most people seem to be voting absentee or early? Do they have enough troops?
It isn't just about going to the polls to interfere with people voting, although his bullying and violence is an attempt to depress the vote. It's what's going to happen after the election between November 3rd and January 20th, and whether he can gin up a scenario where the votes will be discounted, the courts will support his delay tactics on counting the votes, and he can use either his own militias that are going out there right now and that are pledging their loyalty to him. The Proud Boys are responding immediately to his debate request and saying, yes, we are standing by. And they have already been in the streets with guns, and there will be a lot more of them. So, and my real question is, will the military, will police agencies respond to his orders to shut things down, meaning the Democrats, or will they stand up against him? And this is what really worries me. Will the military continue to treat him as the commander in chief who must be obeyed, Or will they decide that these are illegal orders and they will stand against him?
Well, I hate to say that I'm more hopeful about the military, where the vote for Trump is trending away from him now. But the police, well, police unions, none of them have endorsed Biden anywhere in the country.
But this isn't about their votes. It's about their actions post-election to prevent him from being taken out of the White House, because the votes won't be counted and he will just assert a right to stay there.
I mean, the main way, and the plan is already in process, is to send teams of lawyers into swing states to look at the counting of all these absentee ballots. And it is very easy to make a mistake on them, to sign them in the wrong place, to not sign them. Those kinds of things can be discounted. I mean, we learned in the primaries that there were tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots that were invalidated, and they were invalid. So all of you folks who are getting absentee ballots, read the manifold directions carefully, sign it properly, seal it properly, send it in on time with a stamp if they're requiring that. I did mine in New York. I had to put a stamp on it. There was no, return thing. So you've got to be careful about all these things.
I think all that is true. I think we started learning about this 20 years ago in Florida with the hanging chads. But I'm not worried that we can produce vastly more votes for Biden than for Trump. I am worried that he will find other strategies to interfere with the counting of votes and the transition of power. Just as last night, he paid no attention to any agreements, any decorum, any rules. He just bulldozed into that in a violent way and did what he wanted to do to violently interrupt the process. And that you can extrapolate that right into his plans for the 2 months after the election.
And he is mobilizing his troops. And I was kind of alarmed when Kamala Harris was asked about this. Do the Democrats have an operation to counter this? Not a violent operation, but at least the troops of lawyers. And I know they have some, but she was not talking about anything specific about what the counterattack is to that.
Well, Trump has thousands of lawyers already worked up and doing battle across the country to challenge every single Democratic vote. And whether it is through the legal system or on the streets, he is prepared to go to battle. He is not willing to step aside voluntarily and peacefully. And I hate to give credit to Bill Maher, who I really don't have a lot of respect for, but he did call this early. And this is my deep concern.
And what's the answer?
Well, the answer is to be realistic about what's coming and to talk to the military about where their loyalties lie. And it should be to the country and the Constitution, and not to an insane and lawless commander-in-chief who, for many years, I've been calling a traitor, and who is about to exemplify that in an even higher degree as he commits the treason of violating the Constitution.
I spent the run-up to the debate watching the Comey rule.
Me too.
Very depressing watching it. I mean, I think James Comey did hand the election to Trump. We can argue about that, about how that all worked out. But it just brought it all back. And the fact that we've been putting up with this for 4 years is insane. I mean, right after the debate, Dana Bash came right on the air and just said, this is cable television. I don't know. Am I allowed to say this, Rich? She called it a shit show. I mean, just flat out. That's what we watched in the debate. And now I'm reading that the Commission on Debates is meeting to discuss how to get it under control. And one of the simple ways, of course, is to cut the mics of people who aren't speaking.
I don't think that will be adequate. I think he can shout right into Joe Biden's mic. People have to be realistic about the fact, I heard endlessly again last night after the debate, this is busting norms. We need the norms back. What about the norms? These people don't care about the norms. They don't want the norms. That's how Trump got elected in the first place.
Well,
to talk about reinstating the norms is to miss the point of his attack.
Well, Jake Tapper, right after the debate, this was just the initial reaction. The president knows he is going to lose, and he wants to bring the rest of us down with him.
Exactly. And if that means fomenting civil war, he is not loath to do that because he has no loyalty to the country, to the people, to the Constitution, none of it. So he'd be just fine with civil war, and so would the Proud Boys. So and their cohorts. I saw one poll after the debate last night for everyone's revulsion at it. 41% were still supporting Trump after the debate.
That's who's still supporting. 41%.
Yes. 41%. They are.
41% is not going to win an election.
He had 3 million fewer votes in 2016 and he won. And if you're not counting all the votes and you're interfering with the election process, if you have 41% of the public on your side, you're a long way to getting what you want.
I'm counting on Nebraska too. You listening, everybody? The Nebraska, the congressional district there that gets to vote on its own. All the congressional districts pick their own electors. It's not completely statewide. That one vote could make a hell of a difference.
Well, Maine and Nebraska, I think, are the only ones that split their electors. But that's not even the point because, as Nancy Pelosi was saying this morning, what they're thinking ahead about is a situation where it is thrown into the House and each state gets one vote. Alaska gets one vote and California gets one vote based on is it just their house? It's just their House delegations. Yeah. House delegations. So elect some Democrats. That's another thing that can happen. That's what she's working on, is trying to get more Democrats elected to Congress, to the House in those smaller states, so that we can tip the. Actually, I think it's the state legislatures. It's not the.
No. It's that if an election is thrown to the House. An election is thrown to the House when it can't be resolved.
But the state legislatures pick the electors from the state.
That's another thing that they're going to do. I mean, they are going to say, it's in chaos. We're just going to have to take over. We're going to invalidate this. And perhaps they're sabotaging it themselves so that they can say they can invalidate it. And then the state legislatures in the swing states, Wisconsin, Republican, Pennsylvania, et cetera, they can say, we are sending this set of electors. Now, then there could be multiple slates of electors that show up. I mean, this is read the Constitution. It's, we need a new one.
Let's not start down that road. That's
ultimately we're going to have to. We cannot go on like this as a country. I mean, let's get through the election.
Perhaps an amendment or two.
Let's get through the election. But folks, if you're not looking at systemic change, we talk about systemic racism. Let's talk about systemic change in the way we're governed, which is totally unfairly. All right. But I was very disappointed.
Now that everybody has turned off this show.
Well, I mean, let's face facts. It's got to be talked about. Look, I mean, Biden and Harris are avoiding the question about restructuring the courts. That's considered the smart thing to do, is avoid it. They get asked about it all the time. Even Chuck Schumer says everything is on the table. Has to be on the table. If Democrats don't get rid of the filibuster, none of that legislation passed by the House is ever going to get passed in the Senate. You've got to get rid of the filibuster.
Well, unless we do a really clean sweep of Republican senators, but
Barack Obama came in with 60 Democratic senators. It's not going to. Well, it could happen, I suppose. And I have to say,
technically, it could happen. There are a lot of Republicans up for election.
The big talk was about Trump wouldn't condemn, the Proud Boys wouldn't condemn condemn white supremacy, but nobody asked him.
Damn, he's inciting them.
Who do you owe that money to?
Yes.
The story of the week was the fact that he's in the hole hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not pinning down that. And I don't understand why our intelligence agencies aren't telling us who he owes the money to. How can this not be known?
Because they're all run by Trump appointees. And they're not challenging, 2 or 3 people resign and start telling the truth. It has taken them an excruciatingly long period of time. And 99% of people are following his orders. And that's what scares me, that people will continue to follow his orders. But I agree with you that the biggest unasked question of the debate was, who do you owe the money to? And that's certainly what I wanted to hear an answer to.
Maybe a citizen will ask that at the October 15th Forum of Citizens. But there's some hope. The trans billionaire, Jennifer Pritzker, who gave $250,000 to Trump 4 years ago, just gave $2,000 to Joe Biden. And she's an heir to the Hyatt.
Got a ways to go.
she does, but that's some progress.
All right, should we move on to actual issues?
Well, we also had, if you want to talk about scandals, I mean, the spectacle of his former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, trying to take his own life this week. I mean, it's about a financial scandal. He paid himself and his firm $106 million, and he got fired, but he was still on the campaign. And of course, the big spectacle there was he gets tackled by the police, but not killed, even though the wife said he's got 10 weapons around him.
Correct. And evidently he was drunk when ranting and raving and threatening.
Encouraging news, Lindsey Graham. Trump is still leading in South Carolina, but Graham is now on a dead heat with Jamie Harrison. And, or how do you say his name? Jaime.
Jamie.
Harrison. And the Senate majority, PAC for Democrats is pouring, saying this might be a good investment now. They're putting $6.5 million in there. It would be so sweet to see him.
Well, it would be wonderful. And certainly I think Lindsey has done so many horrible things that it would not be it would be understandable if his constituents said, we don't like you, you're creepy. But it's very, very hard to imagine Jamie Harrison beating Lindsey Graham. I look forward to eating those words, but if I were a betting woman, I would not bet on Jamie.
Yes, and
prove me wrong, please.
What I'm drinking is iced tea. A viewer wrote, says, what is that you're drinking? I make my own iced tea, and I needed to get through the show. All right, Amy Coney Barrett. We didn't know last week. We thought she was going to be the one. She is the one. She is. She's
been on deck for a long time. She's been
a federal judge for a couple of years.
3 years on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. She's from Indiana, where she has taught at Notre Dame Law School for 17 years, I guess.
Democrats are rolling over and not doing everything they can to stop her because they think it's useless. Senators such as Feinstein are for closing an end to the filibuster and expanding the court, although Senator Warren, Senator Merkley are pushing for this and ending the filibuster. Let's see.
Well, there is no filibuster for the Supreme Court.
No. I'm saying we're going to get this woman. She's going to be confirmed, barring some. I mean, I think the revelations are pretty horrifying, but barring something that might stop her, she is going to be confirmed, and we're going to have a 6-3 right-wing majority.
I don't think even smoking pot, which destroyed
Douglas Ginsburg.
Yes, is going to, or, not paying the taxes on her babysitter would get rid of her, because the Republicans will vote for her no matter what she says or does. So she's been quite open about her willingness to overturn precedents, which means same-sex marriage is on the line. Brown v. Board of Education is on the line. Roe v. Wade, everything is on the line. And certainly Obamacare, which will be argued before the Supreme Court 1 week after the election. She is, of course, notorious for her religious beliefs, which include saying things like, her sect believes in husbands controlling wives.
Her sect is people of praise, and it's not anti-Catholic to point out. If she were a devout Muslim and belonged to an extremist Muslim organization, and that once said she viewed her participation in the legal profession as a way to bring about the kingdom of Allah, which is basically what she said about her God, Republicans would get the pitchforks out. One
little asterisk here, she has said that she thinks Catholic judges who are devout should recuse themselves from death penalty cases because the church condemns the death penalty. I think this is just her way of eliminating a vote against the death penalty on various cases. And I want to know if she is against the death penalty as a devout Catholic.
Well, she's certainly going to vote to get rid of Roe v. Wade. The crowd at the announcement, we have a picture of them, were mostly unmasked, not healthfully distanced, included Health and Human Services Secretary Azar, who when he's on cable shows has a thing behind him about everybody needs to wear a mask. They just don't do it at these things.
No, and someone said after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died about 2 weeks ago, Trump is very lucky because he got this seat just before the election that he could fill. And he has been very lucky on these, as far as we know, on these open air unmasked crowds, because there hasn't been reported any big wave of infections. He was lucky to get elected in the first place with the distribution of votes, that he lost by 3 million votes, but won the electoral votes. He's lucky in a lot of ways like this. Here are a couple of little things. Did you know that the right wing considers the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution illegitimate?
Because
the Confederate states were not allowed to vote in some way at the time. So the right wing because it was right after the Civil War, the right wing considers the 14th and 15th Amendment protections of equal protection, due process, anti-racist provisions illegitimate, and they think the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution.
What does Amy Coney Barrett think about that?
Well, I have this listed under her, so I wonder. Also, Abe Lincoln did not nominate someone to fill an open seat just before his reelection race.
And also, Abe Lincoln eventually had 10 Supreme Court justices because the number did bounce around in the 19th century. Shortly after, and of course, then when Andrew Johnson came in, they hated him in the Senate, the Republicans of the Senate, who were the good guys then, the anti-slavery party. They wouldn't let him have Supreme Court justices, so it got down to 8. Eventually got back up to 9, I believe, under Ulysses S. Grant. And that's where it stayed, but they can change the number.
Yes, they
without
can.
a constitutional amendment. I mean, the other things that people are talking about, like how about some retirement ages for some of these people or term limits, that you would need a constitutional amendment for because they are life appointments.
I would believe in term limits or a retirement age. I'd be fine with that.
I think,
unfortunately, none of these people would be subject to that. They would be exempted. So
Amy Coney Barrett spoke 5 times for pay to the Alliance Defending Freedom's Blackstone Legal Fellowship, founded to show students, quote, how God can use them as judges to keep the door open for the spread of the gospel in America. I mean, it's very scary.
These are our major opponents on all these cases, the Alliance Defending Freedom. And she is clearly very closely aligned with them. And not only are Obamacare and Roe v. Wade going to be argued in the Supreme Court, but these cases of religious freedom versus non-discrimination laws are going to be adjudicated in the immediate future, and she's unlikely to be on our side.
Which is why it's so important to expand the court, because it's a highly unrepresentative court at this point. Not only is it right-wing, 6 of them are Catholics, 6 of the 9. That's not balance. Kevin Jennings of Lambda said she's going to unleash a majority that's hostile to our basic civil rights, and the impact will be felt for decades, but not if you expand the court. I mean, they keep talking about settled law. Stare decisis is the thing they always say. When something is settled, you got to respect it. Well, we don't want that. We overturned the sodomy decision. We overturned Dred Scott, things like that. It's the high court that decides what the standard is. The lower courts have to follow those precedents. They cannot.
She'll want to overturn a lot.
All right.
Which leaves it to the Congress to write some new laws to put those into effect.
Look. We've gotten some nice decisions out of Anthony Kennedy all those years, et cetera, and out of the court. And that's how we got same-sex marriage nationally. But the Congress doesn't want to weigh in on the controversial issues of the day. They leave it to the courts. I think that's not healthy. I mean, in a parliamentary country, the parliament sets all the laws, and the courts don't have as much of a role. I think the courts have too much of a role in this country, and I don't think it's healthful.
Well, we're now about halfway through this show, and
we haven't talked about anything else. Well, let's go to the Washington Prayer March on Saturday, led by Franklin Graham and joined by Vice President Mike Pence. Tens of thousands, mostly unmasked, not healthfully distanced. They were asking for their God to heal our land, which we're going to do when we vote in this election. Karen Pence was there as well.
Of course. And meanwhile, the federal court has ordered the Department of Defense to hand over the documents surrounding the Trump order to ban trans people from the military. You may remember several years ago that he tweeted one morning, just arbitrarily and out of nowhere, that trans people would not be allowed to serve in the military, catching the Department of Defense off guard, which was in the middle of a process of legalizing trans people serving openly in the military. And then everything flipped because of Trump's tweets. So our side has had court cases going on since then to challenge Trump's order, which the Defense Department then acceded to. And so they have been asking to get the documents behind this decision-making to prove that it was not a necessary thing to ban trans people. And the court has now finally ordered the Defense Department in one of these cases to hand over the documents. We'll see now what Trump does to delay that going into effect.
Trump appointed a Democrat to the EEOC.
Well, he had to.
I was going to give you stepped on my line.
Sorry.
That's all right. It has to be a certain number of Democrats, certain number. So Jocelyn Samuels of the Williams Institute was the one appointed. This is the Democratic seat. She was confirmed by the Senate to the commission.
Well, she's been, she worked at the EEOC, and she was in the Office of Civil Rights at Health and Human Services and the Justice Department under Obama. Lately, she's been the executive director of the think tank, the LGBT think tank, the Williams Institute, and now she's going to be on the EEOC. It's a great, great thing.
Should we do some crime news?
Sure.
Well.
Oh, wait, we left out Eric Trump.
Oh, right, we did. We skipped over him. How could we do that since he went on?
Well, I would have skipped over him, but go ahead.
He went on Fox and Friends, and he talked about all the support from the LGBT community that his father has. And he said, and I'm a part of that community. Whoa. I mean, this went over the internet instantly. The day, as we said in the beginning, he pulled out. He just means that he has gay friends. And if we find out who you are, we're going to have to come and have a talk with you.
Yes, we'll send the Proud Boys after you. But yes, there are too many stories of violence and distress this week, starting in Independence, Missouri, where another Black trans woman, Ariane Burnett, 37 years old, shot dead. Her friends described her as someone who made everyone smile, life of the party.
They called her a goddess.
Yeah.
Her good friend. She was misgendered in the initial stories, dead named. But this was on September 19th. In the Bronx, a grisly murder. We don't know the name of the victim, or I don't know the name of the victim yet, but the perpetrator, Juan Alonso, 50 years old, allegedly hacked his male grinder date to death with a machete after a dispute over bedroom sex acts. He was dressed in a bra and panties at the time, holding a machete when the police came because his roommate called the police, and he'd already killed this person who he was charged with murder, manslaughter, and criminal possession of a weapon. The victim was cut up into pieces. It's just horrendous.
Well, and also horrendous, James Williams, 51, has now been charged with murder for stabbing to death Messiah Berkeley, 20 years old, who is a mural artist, wonderful murals, at the beach at Far Rockaway in Queens, New York. They evidently had a few previous encounters, and Williams, the perpetrator, was calling Messiah fag and going after him. And they got into this little back and forth. And then Williams pulls out a knife and just stabs the guy dead.
2 counts of second-degree murder is a hate crime.
Terrible.
In Hillsborough County, Tampa, Florida, police undercover agents arrested 11 men for exhibiting or soliciting lewd acts in public parks in Operation Cleanup. This is in Sun City Heritage Park and Sydney Dover Conservation Park. The men were from 37 to 76, and then they felt obliged to put their pictures up on the internet and accuse them of vile acts. They haven't been convicted of anything. And by the way, we learned this week that Rob Halford of Judas Priest said that he was arrested in a Venice Beach restroom in 1992, but when the cops realized who he was, we'll cover this up.
Well, this Florida case is a sting operation, decoy cops going into the park, soliciting sex from these guys, and then when they respond, they get arrested, and they get their names and their pictures in the paper, accused, as you say, of vile acts and deviant activity. The sheriff held a news conference to brag about how these horrible perpetrators had been captured, and he was cleaning up the park where our children play. It's in this day and age to find out that yet again this is going on. They've
never done this to heterosexuals in lovers' lanes.
Never.
They just say maybe button up or whatever, but they never arrest them.
Did we talk about Key Sam in Lafayette, Louisiana, murdered in August in a hotel by a 16-year-old?
No.
I think that case has just come to light. This now makes 27 or 28 trans people murdered in 2020, already as many as were murdered in 2019 that we know of, reported cases. We're 3/4 of the way through the year. Clearly, these cases are escalating in spite of advances for the trans community and real progress, and yet these cases continue.
Why wouldn't they when Mike Pompeo is speaking at anti-LGBT hate groups? Yeah. He's got a date on October 3rd at the Florida Family Policy Council. You can have a personal visit with him for $10,000 and sit near him for $5. No masks required. Ethical violation.
A website called socialcatfish.com has put out a report warning people that in the age of COVID, when you are going online more frequently to visit porn sites, those sites are capturing your information and turning around and running blackmail schemes against people, threatening to reveal your activity. And so another reminder, as well as the murder of the Grindr date, that you really, really have to be extremely careful.
Well, it's very hard. I mean, the Russians figured out a way to lock up some people they didn't like by just putting child porn on their computers. Was one of their schemes. So and they can do this to you whether you go to these porn sites or not. Right.
And the Cincinnati Reds broadcaster, Tom Brenneman, we talked about a couple of months ago when he was suspended for his anti-gay slur on the air, has now resigned completely from baseball and was dropped by Fox Football. The Reds say that he's making heartfelt efforts of reconciliation. I don't have any details on that, but he is gone as a broadcaster in the Cincinnati area. And in Chicago, where they've long had a neighborhood on the north side that's known officially as Boys Town, and there have been too many reports of trans people, women being mistreated in that area, refused jobs, harassed. And so the city has decided, at the behest of local businesses have decided to drop the name Boys Town and rebrand the area North Halsted, Chicago's proudest neighborhood.
Yes, but they did a survey of 7,900 people, and 58% wanted to retain Boys Town. That's where it is. So it'll be a struggle. In New York, our friend and colleague, Corey Johnson, has dropped out of the mayor's race. He's the out gay, out HIV positive Speaker of the City Council, and he opened up to everybody. We kind of figured something was going on. Something's been going on with all of us during this period, but he copped to being depressed and having clinical depression and trying to deal with that. He said, the only other time I can ever remember feeling this way was when I was a teenager, 16 years old and closeted. And of course, he was the joyful candidate who was going to run next year, the guy who jumped around at parades, and now we're facing
danced at parades.
We and all cities, but New York more than others, are facing a rather bleak financial future. So he is.
Well, it's a shame because Corey was seen very much as a front runner when he first announced, beginning of this year, a year ago, and was doing very well. And all of this has come crashing down, as you say, on all of us, this epidemic and the financial problems and everything else. And it's been a lot for anybody to handle. So I'm sympathetic to his making this decision. And he's young, he's 38, and he's got a long and bright future ahead of him.
He still is the Speaker of the Council, and he says he's going to stay there, and he has to do another budget next year, which is going to be very, very tough. In California, Governor Newsom signed 4 pro-LGBT bills, expanding protection for trans people in prison, data collection on LGBT people in the pandemic, a trans wellness and equity fund to help trans, non-binary, and intersex people access housing and healthcare, and a bill to fight discrimination against people with HIV in healthcare. We should be passing these bills in all of our states and in the Congress.
Facebook, you thought Facebook was bad enough on its letting the Russians run our elections. Well, I have to say I was shocked by this. They rejected an ad by a lesbian couple who are a singing group, and they'd put up an ad for their new video, Unsung Lily. And here is the picture of them. The picture is of them looking at each other with their foreheads touching. Their foreheads touching. This was censored by Facebook as sexually explicit.
It's what's been happening for a long time, getting same-sex kisses in movies has been
They're not kissing; their foreheads are touching.
any kind of affection. Jane Alexander and Jenna Rollins did a movie where they played lesbians, and the only thing they were allowed to do was comb each other's hair.
Now, I would agree that is sexually explicit. All right. We told you a couple of weeks ago about the death of Randall Keenan, a very well-known, well-respected, out gay Black writer and professor. Well, now, posthumously, he has been nominated for a National Book Award for his collection of short stories, If I Had Two Wings.
We'll hear about that on October 6th, if he's one of the winners.
Great honor.
And then in Puerto Rico, Soraya Santiago, 73, an LGBTQ icon. She has died. She was the first person from Puerto Rico to undergo gender confirmation surgery in the 1970s. She had to go to New York for it. She returned and was the first trans person to successfully change her name and her sex on a birth certificate. She was a hairstylist, and she was the first trans person to run for public office in Puerto Rico.
And if these history lessons interest you, you should tune in to the new season 8 of Making Gay History, the podcast produced by Eric Marcus. For the first 7 seasons, he's been running the audio of interviews he did in the 80s with LGBTQ leaders and activists. And now he has switched. He has gotten access to the Studs Terkel radio archives of interviews and has picked out the LGBTQ ones and is making season 8 running those. Lorraine Hansberry, Quentin Crisp, Christopher Isherwood, the Mattachine Midwest group, Jill Johnston, Leonard Matlovich, Meg Christian, and Leslie, a 1940s female impersonator, as they were then called. So season 8 of Making Gay History, the podcast.
If you send me that link, Ann Northrup, I will put it in our email. And if you out there sign up for our email, I will send it to all of you.
makinggayhistory.org.
And
try that.
I'm also going to send one out for the New York City LGBT Historic Sites Project about the push for the gay rights bill from 1970 to 75. It's going to be on October the 5th. I'll put that in the email as well. All right.
International news.
You
got something else?
Well, the Minnesota court that ruled for the trans boy who sued his school district after being forced to use enhanced privacy locker rooms. He won his case at that level. All right.
In Germany, the Catholic Church will pay abuse victims 50,000 euros each and cover their therapy costs. Of course, this says those abused say this isn't nearly enough, but it's more than the 5,000 that they were originally offering. An independent body will certify the cases.
The UK government continues to retreat on transgender issues. They issued guidance telling teachers not to tell children they might be a different gender based on their personality or the clothes that they wear. There's a big letter in the United Kingdom from writers defending J.K. Rowling, including Tom Stoppard, which I was very disappointed to read, and I'm outraged about that. But there were more English and Irish writers who wrote embracing the transgender community in response to this. And finally, in the UK, a sperm donor is suing a clinic for using his sperm to help same-sex couples and single moms have babies. He said, "I stipulated you couldn't do this, and you did it." And I think, I'm not anti-gay. I just think you should have a father and a mother. And he got a 5-figure sum in his lawsuit.
Oh, my God. How can you control your sperm like that after you've donated it?
He made a stipulation and they violated it.
It sounds ridiculous.
I don't think they should accept stipulations like that.
Exactly. In the Ukraine, 500 people marched for LGBT rights. They were protected by the National Guard and cops to the tune of 700 people protecting the 500 marching. This was in the town of Zaporozhye.
Yes.
I'm making up that pronunciation.
No, it looks right.
But congratulations to them. That's great. And in Uruguay, in Montevideo, thousands of people showed up to march for LGBT rights, wearing masks, many of them. And my favorite slogan to come out of this march was, "The oppressive state is a misogynistic rapist."
Wow.
Okay.
In Poland, diplomats from 50 countries are calling for an end to Poland's anti-LGBT discrimination, and included in the letter were the United States, Israel, India, and the European Union, saying, stop this.
Georgette Mosbacher, ambassador, was signed on to that because she has a lesbian stepdaughter.
In the country of Greece, in a first, a court recognized non-binary identity.
And in Belarus, LGBT activists are prominent in the anti-dictator protests, Lukashenko, I guess, but I don't know that they're getting anywhere there.
Yeah, horrible story out of Honduras where the journalist Luis Almandares who has publicly condemned anti-LGBT violence and corruption in Honduras, which is rampant. He was shot and killed while doing a live Facebook show. He wrote about a story called "To Be Gay in a Country of Machos," and he defended transgender people. 86 journalists in Honduras, have been killed since 2001, and 90% of the cases have not been prosecuted.
In Canada, at something called the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, they've done a study of young trans people, 300 of them, aged 10 to 17. And what they've discovered in this study is that early treatment of people with gender identity issues, early treatment as in puberty blockers, hormones, I don't think surgery, but early intervention to support young people has an enormously positive effect on their mental health. Sure. And to wait and not believe them and not support them is torture, essentially, and really is bad for their mental health.
I'm not a fan of the Pope, but sometimes he does a good thing. He called off a meeting with Mike Pompeo. He didn't want to be seen as endorsing Trump.
And Japan Airlines has decided to stop using in their English announcements gender-specific greetings. It will now
ladies and gentlemen will no longer be used.
No, just hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone, which they already do in Japanese because they evidently don't have gender-specific pronouns or whatever.
You were making me think of something from a William Burroughs novel that I can't repeat on the air. AIDS news. Well, we're very sad to learn of the death of Timothy Ray Brown, although we told you that he was very sick. He was the Berlin patient, the first who got HIV removed from his system. He died after a 5-month battle with leukemia, which was his original disease, which made him get the infusions that gave him the immunity to HIV. He was 54 and survived by his husband, Tim Hofgen. He was diagnosed with AIDS in 1995 and in 2007 with leukemia. And he had 2 stem cell transplants that cured his HIV and put him in remission for the leukemia. He devoted his life after that to sharing his story.
And the transplants worked for him because what was transplanted into him was
PCR5 delta 32 deletion.
That was resistant to HIV, that eradicated the HIV. He was a true hero because he went out and talked and made himself public and did not retreat from telling this whole story. And a great advocate of PrEP. He went on PrEP later to make sure that he remained HIV negative. I also, the Zero Project, which fights HIV criminalization and other issues, has announced that this time is just crucial, and they are going to turn all their work, all their funds, everything they have to the election. Healthcare.
All groups should do that. I'm tired of just asking me to sign a petition to the Trump administration on the environment. Forget about it. Just work to change the government. That's the only thing that's going to save us in the short run.
Because if this administration is reelected, healthcare is at risk. HIV criminalization will be much more rampant. All of this is important. And they had a line in their press release, which really impressed me and which I think played out in the debate last night. Those who are being abused are most at risk when they are leaving their abuser. And I think that's why you saw Trump lash out so violently last night, is because he is the abuser and we are leaving him.
Although Kevin Sessom said Melania looked very happy for the first time last night. I read
the light at the end of the tunnel.
I read this story from a viewer and I woke up with a headache for the first time in a long time. LGBT people are much more likely to get migraine headaches. A third have experienced them, 58% more than heterosexual participants in this study. But the researchers don't know why. They think it may be the stress.
Maybe. I have other issues, not that. Excuse me?
AIDS, entertainment, where are we going?
Entertainment news.
All right.
In our remaining 7 minutes.
Yes.
Hallmark Channel is producing a LGBT-themed Christmas movie, The Christmas House. Mom and dad convene the family, including 2 sons, one of whom has a same-sex partner, and they are trying to adopt. So Lifetime and Hallmark neck and neck on the gay-themed Christmas movies.
Okay. Angels in America, a 1-hour version. I condensed from about 7. Introduced by Tony Kushner, is going to be online October 8th at 8:30 on BroadwayWorld.com. We have a picture there of Glenn Close as Roy Cohn and S. Apatha Merkerson as Belize. And a lot of people come in and out of the roles, play other roles. It's going to be quite a hodgepodge, but I'm looking forward to it. Patti Lupone is going to be an angel. There are about 15 stars in it.
Andrew Rannells, Lois Smith, Linda Emond, Laura Linney, Daphne Rubin Vega, Jeremy
O'Hara. Non-traditional casting, but they had non-traditional casting in the original, including Kathleen Chalfant playing the old Soviet person. And she is going to be playing Mary White Ovington in a play by our friend Claire Koss, out lesbian, about Mary White Ovington and W.E.B. Du Bois, who were the founders of the NAACP. So I'll include that in the email as well. She's going to be doing that with Peter J. Fernandez, and it's going to be October 9th, 10th, 11th.
Back to Christmas movies. Sony Pictures is making a feature Christmas movie, The Happiest Season, starring Kristen Stewart and Mackenzie Davis as a lesbian couple going home for the holidays. First major studio queer holiday movie. Kristen Stewart, pretty hot. A viewer recommended to us The Dragon Prince on Netflix, a children's movie inclusive on race, sexual orientation, and disability. And Boys in the Band, the latest Broadway revival version, that cast is going to be in a movie version on Netflix.
When does that start?
Momentarily, I think.
Okay. Michael Musto has a new occasional column. We have a picture of him at queerty.com. This week, it's bracketed by tantalizing blind items. He touts an FX series on LGBTQ rights going back to the 1950s that he is featured in, along with Ann Northrup. Next June. Thanks for the plug for Gay USA, Michael.
The column is called Read Now, Cry Later.
Oh, it's great. It's a great title.
And New Fest, the LGBTQ film festival in New York, is playing starting October 16th online. So you can watch an amazing array of feature films, shorts, all sorts of things by going to newfest.org and signing up for that. It's amazing how one silver lining of the epidemic is that there's a lot of stuff available online that you could only see in person locally before.
So last week we told you how Schitt's Creek swept all the comedy Emmys, and it's on Netflix. So I finally started to watch it, and it's funny, and I'm looking forward to watching more. I'm only in the second season, I think, now. Dan Levy is the creator of it, one of the stars of it, plays an out gay character, is out gay in life, and he's also in the papers because he has become a big pusher of Indigenous education, about Indigenous people in Canada, and he's really helped that take off up there.
Well, he's Canadian. The family's all Canadian, so this is his local.
Love Canadians, or many of them. And I also started watching Last Tango in Halifax. It was been on PBS for years, and I love, Derek Jacobi and Anne Reid, who are the stars of it. And I thought it sounded a little cutesy about two old people who meet 60 years later and get married. That's basically but it is full of lesbianism. I'm telling you, this thing is Baroque in its plot. It's a little town up near Halifax in Yorkshire, and everybody sleeps with everybody else. And so, wow.
So it's Halifax, England, not Halifax, Canada.
That is correct. The Last Tango in Halifax. It's still on PBS in the later seasons, but I'm catching up on Netflix.
Well, maybe I should take a look at that. I think I've read about that, but not dipped into it.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a minute or two.
Well, I mean, we also saw the passing of Tony Tanner this week, who directed Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which made his name, and of course made Andrew Lloyd Webber. He has died at the age of 88. He's survived by his husbands, Henry Selvitel. He was also known as doing a one-man show on Diaghilev.
Yeah. I'm not sure I have anything else to report. I'm just too wrapped up in my fear of the coming apocalypse after the election. Maura Barger said what happened last night, well, we're speaking on Wednesday, was absolutely frightening. And people have to mobilize. It's frightening, and we have a month left. It's going to get worse in the next month. This is not going to cool down. This is not going to be Trump hears that people are upset and retreats.
Well, I was watching the headlines in the background here, and he said, no, I don't want the Proud Boys to do it. I want law enforcement to do it. But he can't.
See?
Yes.
He thinks he can mobilize the armed forces and law enforcement to do his bidding. And that is what he is out to do. And to the extent that law enforcement has endorsed him, they may be tempted to do that.
The reason he is so freaked out is because he's going to prison when this is over. Because he is a crook. Nixon may not have been a crook, but this guy is a crook.
A bad one. And he is liable to end up there.
Bye-bye.